Back. Spike is back. He's here. Such a good feeling. I mean, we really needed this, and I have to say how good it is, Jacob, to have you on this bima at a time where we all need to be buoyed, you know, and your music, your creativity, your neshama, bring all of those things we've missed so much. How long has it been? 3 years now?
No.
2 years?
No.
2 years.
Like, Cantor Smolash said I'm not allowed to say it's longer than a year and a half.
Okay, it's officially a year and a half.
He said he couldn't handle if it was longer, if it was 2 years. So year and a half it is.
But if I remember correctly, the last time you were here and you were a part of our congregation serving this group and you know, building your musical visions and dreams, we were also going through a very, very challenging time. And I know that for us, having your presence here meant so very much because, again, you brought incredible energy and creativity that really guided us and brought us together in some very difficult times. So I think it's not coincidence that you're back and that you're back at this time, and how fortunate we are to have you sharing a message with us tonight as our sermonizer and for our sermon and song. So Jacob Spike Kraus.
Shabbat Shalom. I move over to the rabbi lectern because then I get to do this, and it makes me look like I know what I'm talking about. That's the trick. It's about stage presence. I cannot tell you how much my soul needed this Shabbat this evening. Thank you so much for welcoming Casey and I back into this this community that has become like a second home to us. You sound fantastic. However good you think you sound over there, you sound way better up here. I spent a long time looking at the Torah portion this week. It's Parshat Toldot. Toldot means generations. Trying to figure out what to speak about. This Parsha shows our ancestors arguably at their worst, scene after scene after scene. There's fighting, there's stealing, there's deceiving. It's safe to say that the guys in Toldot are not winning Time Person of the Year anytime soon. And I kept getting drawn back to the first sentence of our portion. It says, Eile Toldot Yitzchak ben Avraham. These are the generations of Isaac, Abraham's son. This phrasing, Eile Toldot, it shows up a bunch of times in the book of Genesis. And the wild thing is, not a single time does the sentence that follows, Eile Toldot, these are the generations, include a list of descendants, ever. Not once. You'd think that if you start a story with, these are the generations of so-and-so, we would then proceed to get a list of the generations of so-and-so. It's a pretty stupid way to start a story otherwise, right? Is it that the Torah doesn't understand how words work? What exactly is going on here? So way back in Genesis chapter 2, we get the first usage of Eile Toldot. It says, Eile Toldot hashamayim v'ha'aretz. These are the generations of the heaven and the earth when they were created. So already right from the jump, we know there's something fishy going on with our wording here, because heaven and earth are inanimate objects. They can't procreate or reproduce. What could they give birth to? There aren't consecutive generations of heaven and earth. There's just heaven and earth. So why Eile Toldot? These are the generations. Let's dive deeper and see what's up. These are the generations of heaven and earth when they were created. Semicolon. Biyom asot Adonai Elohim eretz v'shamayim. In one day, God created heaven and earth. So the translation generations, it doesn't make sense. But what are we really talking about when we think and reflect on the concept of generations? We're talking about legacy. So what if Toldot is actually about legacy? Eile Toldot, this is the legacy of heaven and earth when they were created. Semicolon. that God created heaven and earth in one day. Creation is the legacy of heaven and earth. And I'd argue that because this is the first usage of Eile Toldot in the Torah, and because it shows up in a context where the translation generations doesn't actually make sense, this translation, this concept of Toldot as legacy, is actually how we're supposed to understand this phrase whenever it shows up later on in the book of Genesis. So fast forward 4 chapters. Eile Toldot Noach. These are the generations of Noah. But then we don't get anything about Noah's children. Shouldn't it be, these are the generations of Noah, semicolon, Shem, Ham, and Japheth? Side note case, let's put Japheth on the baby names list for some down the line. No? Veto. I got a veto. Okay. That's how language is supposed to work, right? These are the generations, then we get the generations. But once again, we don't get that. In fact, we get the exact same sentence structure that we got 4 chapters before. Eile Toldot Noach, these are the generations of Noah, a righteous man in his generation, semicolon, Noah walked with God. And so once again, generations doesn't make any sense. But what is Noah's legacy? This is the legacy of Noah. Eile Toldot Noach, this is Noah's legacy. Noah was a righteous man of his generation, semicolon, Noah walked with God. And that's the reason God chooses to save Noah and Noah's family when God sends a flood to destroy the earth. In a world where humanity ceased to exist, Noah strove to be human. That's Noah's legacy. So you see we're building a pattern here. Eile Toldot, this is the legacy of so-and-so, semicolon, what is the legacy? Right? We're on the same page? Great. Genesis chapter 25, Eile Toldot. I lost my spot. Ve'eile Toldot Yitzchak ben Avraham, and this is the legacy of Isaac, Abraham's son. Semicolon. Avraham holid et Yitzchak. Abraham fathered Isaac. What in the nepotism is that supposed to mean? This is Isaac's legacy. He was Abraham's kid. It's like the Torah doesn't give a hoot about Isaac. Right? He's the forefather we know the least about. We get 3 whole Torah portions on Abraham's life. We get even more than that about Jacob. Toldot is the only Torah portion that really truly features Isaac. Like, he shows up in other stories, but he's always a passive character to a different protagonist. Remember a few weeks ago, we read about the Akedah, the sacrificing of Isaac, where the test God gives Abraham is to sacrifice his son Isaac on Mount Moriah. So Isaac is there, but that story is about Abraham. Later in this portion, right, we hear the story of Jacob tricking Isaac into giving him his blessing. And that story is more about Jacob than it is about Isaac. Isaac doesn't even get to pick out his own wife. He's not present at that conversation, which feels kind of important. So how are we supposed to feel that the Torah seemingly suggests that Isaac's entire legacy is that he's Abraham's kid? What does that mean? Is it really as demeaning as it might appear at first glance? Maybe not. You see, it's important to be a trailblazer. It's hard to be the first. It's even harder to be the second. Everybody talks about George Washington. Fewer people talk about John Adams. I mean, I do because I'm from the great state of Massachusetts, and I was indoctrinated quite young to see John Adams' importance to the founding of our country through the movie musical 1776, nominated for Best Picture at the 1973 Golden Globes, and starring the one and only William Daniels, shout out, whose future accolades would include the role of the all-knowing principal, Mr. Feeney, on the 90s sitcom Boy Meets World. And yet, Think about what happens to our country if there's nobody to carry on the mantle after George Washington. Innovators plant dreams, but consolidators give them roots that sustain them. Abraham's dream, our dream, doesn't continue without Isaac. And we know that's the driving force of Isaac's life because it's written out several times in this week's Torah portion. There are only two, stories in the Torah where Isaac takes an active role. The first is this somewhat problematic story in today's Torah portion about Isaac redigging his father's wells. It says, Vayashav Yitzchak vayachpor et habe'arot hamayim. And Isaac dug again the wells of water which they had dug in the days of Abraham his father. Vayikra lahem shemot kishemot asher kara lahen aviv. And he called their names after the names his father had called them. Isaac is carrying on Abraham's legacy. And a few scenes later, we see that Isaac blesses Jacob and sends him to live with his brother Laban so that he marries a wife of the family and not a Canaanite woman like Esau did. So in the entire Torah, we get two, you counted them, two stories where Isaac is actively doing something. And that something is that he's carrying on his father's legacy, his family legacy. He's being the second, the one that gives the dream roots. And though it might seem like the Torah is insulting Isaac by explaining the legacy in this way, that it's all tied to his father Abraham, the rabbis, at least, start to understand just how important that role really is. Anybody know how our Torah portion is named? The first important word. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim v'ha'aretz. The very first portion of the Torah is called Bereshit, creation. And back in chapter 6, our portion started with these words. Ele Toldot Noach. But that portion isn't called Toldot. It's called Noach. Why? Because the most important part of the Noah story is Noah. But what's the most important thing to Isaac's story, to Isaac's legacy? It's Toldot. It's generations. Isaac's whole legacy is being the key instrumental figure that enables Abraham's dream to not die with him, to grow roots, to live on for generations to come. That's why Toldot, now in chapter 25, is finally important enough to be the name of the portion. Because Isaac is the one who makes it possible. Isaac is the second. And if you look closely, you can actually find moments where Isaac makes his own unique personal impact on our history. Isaac has to redig the wells that Abraham dug because the Philistines stoppered up all of the wells after Abraham died. Isaac is the one who finally figures out how to dig the wells that last. And the text says that Jacob deceives his father into giving him Esau's blessing. But if you read the story, it's pretty obvious that Isaac knows exactly what's going on. And he makes a conscious choice to acquiesce to the deception because he realizes that Jacob, and not Esau, is the son that's going to carry on his legacy and the legacy of Abraham, his father, to the next generation. The Torah says the most important piece of Isaac is that he's Abraham's son. But the truth shows so much more than that. You see, it's his individuality, his uniqueness, his ability to think differently that allows him to succeed where Abraham failed and to break with tradition to ensure that his Toldot, his generations, will even have the resources to build legacies of their own. So this Shabbat, think about your legacy. What's the most important part of your story? How much of it comes from those who came before you? And how much of it is uniquely your own? Shabbat Shalom.